Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Perspectives. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. As many of you know, we love to interview people with a diagnosis to understand truly that first person perspective. Well, joining me now is Zel Bocknek and his wife, Gail. Zel is quite an amazing story. He just celebrated his 90th birthday this year. A belated happy birthday to Zel. He is a 90-year-old living an active life with Alzheimer's disease. Active, meaning he still skis. So, Zel, Gail, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
All is on top.
Okay, so what I want to know first and foremost is, you are a prime example, Zell, of somebody who is truly living with Alzheimer's. There's no, I'm not seeing decline. I mean, maybe things happen that we don't know about, but it seems like you still have a joy of living. So tell me a little bit about your perspective of living with Alzheimer's disease.
I don't think that
I can.
I'm not suffering like
now.
a lot of people are suffering, but I have memory losses. I can't remember names. Things come that I try to remember, I can't. I wake up in the middle of the night and I remember. So I have that sort of thing going on. And I think one thing that my wife said early on to the people from Toronto Memory Organization, they said, when Zelik turned 50, his three sons, lovely kids, got him a new birthday present, and it was a license plate that said, I forget. And if he was like that, he was like that back when he was 50, and he really hasn't changed since.
First, tell us a little bit. Let's start from when you got a diagnosis. Were you in your 80s when you got a diagnosis?
Well, when I turned 84, I had a brother who was a lawyer, a judge, and about 2 years after he retired from judging, he started to deteriorate, and no one knew really what, at that stage, what was wrong with him. But he lived with his wife for a few years, and then it got to the point where she couldn't handle him anymore. He was dangerous, and he went to Baycrest Hospital. And there he deteriorated till he was, he didn't know who he was, who we were, and he couldn't take care of himself. And that was of great concern to me. I didn't want to experience that if I could avoid it. And Gail had heard of the Toronto Memory Organization, so we called them and we had a talk with them, and they invited us, said, well, why don't you come down? We went down there and they talked to us, and they gave me some little tests, and then they said, well, would you like to join the program? Especially because I was about 4.5 months from 85. No one could volunteer if they were 85 or older. So I would end up being the oldest person to volunteer. I said yes. And so for the first 1.5 years, I was on the infusion every 2 weeks. No one could tell me whether I was getting anything or I was on the neutral stuff.
So wait, let me back up for people who are just watching, because not everyone may be familiar. I think what you're referring to is the lecanemab study, right? You were
Lecanemab,
which is lecanemab. So you were
right.
in clinical trial, which is a monoclonal antibody therapy to treat Alzheimer's disease. What it does is the medication eliminates plaque in the brain, which is the first hallmark. So it's for early stage patients. And so you, by the Toronto Memory Clinic, you were being told about this trial. And by that, I'm assuming you had a diagnosis, or was it the trial that diagnosed you with Alzheimer's?
Well, I think that go ahead.
There's one thing. What they did is, one of the things they did is they did some scans, brain scans. And they said there wasn't enough of one, but there was the amyloids. And so they said that qualifies Zel for the lecanemab trials. But they also said, we won't know if you're on the placebo or on the medication itself. And then COVID hit. And that kind of screwed things up for everybody for about 7 or 8 months.
But I was on it for about 1.5 years, and then they said your initial initial trip here is over now. What do you want to do? Continue or stop? I said, well, what happens if I continue? They said, then head office will tell us if you were on the medication or not. So I said, I'm going to continue. And so then they told me that I was not on it for the first shot, but from then on, I've been on it for another 3.5 years, every 2 weeks.
So you were a placebo in the study, correct? Yes.
Yes.
The first part of the study.
The first part of it. Okay. And so now you've been on the medication for 3.5 years.
That's right.
And
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks you get an infusion. And obviously, I'd love to hear your perspective of what you believe this trial is doing in terms of your health and memory.
Well, I think my memory basically has stayed the same. I still forget names and things like that. It has given me a calmness and I'm not worried about it anymore because I'm staying in a reasonable, good state. And regularly, 3 or 4 times a year, Gail and I are invited. Gail comes down to the infusion day, and 2 ladies separately question Gail on things that between Gail and I. And then they come and question me. And they're doing that to see if we both look at me and my activity and how I conduct myself the same. And basically, we get along. We do the same thing.
Gail, how old was Zel when he was first diagnosed? And tell me what you're noticing as his wife.
Well, the first one was when Zel said when he was 84. And the only real notices that I've seen, yes, Zel's memory is not what it was never good. But what I see now is that if I say to Zel, we're going to do something, he might say to me an hour later, what are we doing that or whatever. So that little bit. But what I've noticed, and I think it seems to pertain to men more than the women, is that women are more conditioned to multitask, whereas men aren't. So when you say something to a female who's used to multitasking, she kind of slots it someplace. But I mean, some of the stuff that they would ask us, for example, was, does Zel do housework? Well, Zel never did housework, so he wasn't going to start now. Can Zel drive more than 1 kilometer in his car without getting lost? Well, Zel goes to his volunteer positions and he doesn't get lost. So the main thing is that other than that bit of memory, which is, continued, I think he also, I've noticed that his patience isn't what it used to be. But on the other hand, most of the people I know at his age, their patience isn't what it used to be. And we all forget names. I think, we all sort of go, oh my God, what's that person's name again? I can't remember. Or what was the name of that restaurant that we went to? I think, and so it's very hard, like that lady you mentioned in the study, to discern which is which. When we were last at the memory clinic, they said to me, and I don't quite remember exactly, but they said there's a marker that they use. And in Zel's case, sometimes he's 1 up, sometimes he's 1 down, but basically it has not changed in the 5 years. So for nothing else, that's a blessing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Zel, I'm curious about what were early signs for you? I mean, we're focused, we always ask this question in hindsight, like looking, not when you were ready to go into the trial and you thought, oh, wow, there's something that's not quite right. But previous to that, was there anything in hindsight that you noticed may have been an early sign of Alzheimer's disease?
There was nothing that I experienced and realized were signs of Alzheimer. I didn't even give it a second thought. And maybe some of these things that I was forgetting were signs of it, but I didn't think of it until I saw my brother going down. And then I began to worry, I hope I can't be like him and deteriorate. But at that point, I was 84 already, and said I better take steps as quickly as I can to find out if I am in that way or risking it, how can I prevent it?
What was the kind of moment that you thought, I should go to the Toronto Memory Clinic, or I should seek someone else's opinion? Like, what was the turning point for you?
When my brother died, when he died, I said, boy, I better really find out. And that's when we eventually called the Toronto Memory Organization.
Do you have, so it sounds like you have Alzheimer's in your family. It's your brother, and is there anyone else?
No, it wasn't my brother, because when they later on they found out that he didn't have the brain deterioration. What he had was blood vessels in the brain were drying up.
It was vascular dementia.
Yeah, and so he
Vascular, more of a
that's what
vascular.
he had, but we didn't know that, and I just didn't want to follow him in the direction he fell.
Zel's genetic in his family is quite astounding. His mom passed away just before she turned 95, and she was playing bridge up until 3 days before. And his sister is 94. And Ruthie gets a little bit befuddled at times, but she lives independently in her own apartment and walks everywhere in downtown Toronto. So the genetics in their family is quite amazing.
I think that's funny.
That's amazing. Okay, so obviously you had, did you have a PET scan? How did you find out that you qualified for lecanemab?
I think it was the PET scan.
Well, they gave me,
Brain scan.
brain scans, and then I had brain scans, I think 3 times a year, just to make sure that once they found out where I was at, they wanted to make sure I wasn't in any way deteriorating and had brain deterioration because of whatever. And they found that nothing was changing.
So in order though, for you to be on this medication, you had to have amyloid in your brain, right? Because so they confirmed that there was indeed amyloid in your brain.
Yeah, they did that, but then everybody has amyloids. As that study showed, everybody has amyloids in their brain. So I'm not even sure. I mean, we're thrilled with lecanemab because lecanemab has we assume that lecanemab has maintained a level for all of us that is outstanding. But the other little niggly part of it is it amyloids initially? But the lecanemab has been, for our family and for Zel and our grandkids, our kids, nothing has really changed in our lives.
So do you notice, Gail, anything with Zel's memory? Is it staying the same? Is it slipping a little bit? Like, what do you notice as his wife?
Well, I noticed, as I said, that, before he could remember, but Zel, his dad, always told us and told Zel and his kids, write everything down. So Zel always writes everything down. So, and the other thing I noticed when I said about men, what I've also noticed is Zel would say to me, how do you spell something? And I would say to him, I'm not telling you because I'm very mean. And I'd say, you tell me how you think you should spell it. And 9 times out of 10, whether it's a word or whether he was doing a crossword puzzle or whatever, he could figure it out. And I think sometimes people get lazy and they mistake it for lack of memory. But I think it's a laziness. And in the study, as they said to you, even from California and with Zel, you've seen maybe in his other interview, our granddaughter got Zel into do paint with numbers, and they're quite extraordinary. And I think that eye-hand coordination and following through has been amazing, but I may be wrong. I just think it's been terrific.
It is quite amazing, Zel. I mean, like, I love the fact that like Alzheimer's hasn't stopped you at all, right? I mean, the diagnosis, you're still skiing. And tell me a little bit about that. I mean, you obviously are not a 90-year-old. You're like, I feel like your physical fitness doesn't equate to most 90-year-olds. I mean, if you're still slopes, there's a lot of 60-year-olds that don't ski anymore,
I started when I was about 16 and just skiing in Toronto, Little Hills. And then as you get older, you start to go in where the first place we went, there were 3 toes, one after the other to get you to the top. And about 33 or 4 years ago, I saw an ad in the paper. And by this time I was already, I would say, a good skier. And I saw an ad in the paper for Colorado, come and ski better, learn how to ski. So a friend of mine and I went, and this one guy was in charge of the whole group of about 60 people who showed up, and he divided them into groups by examining them. And we're the oldest group, an older aged group. And he took over that group, whereas other people took over the other groups. And he said to us right at the beginning, let the skis do the skiing. And when you did that, instead of using all your muscles, you'd edge the ski and just controlled it. So you were now able to ski long runs, whereas before I would get tired. Now I wasn't getting tired. And we were all doing better and skiing terrifically.
And they called them the Over the Hill Gang.
Yeah, we called ourselves the Over the Hill Gang.
That's wonderful. I mean, but tell me a little bit about that. Like you didn't, a lot of people would say, oh, I have this diagnosis, maybe I shouldn't be on the mountain and it could be dangerous, but you obviously don't think that.
No, I had no idea of any bad mental case. And physically, I've always been, and my family has always been very physical. My mother and father were both athletes. And I almost went into becoming a lawyer, but I hated the exams and study. And I quit one year after an exam, and I walked across to the other division at the University of Toronto and joined the phys ed department, and eventually ended up teaching and phys ed and coaching football, basketball.
Dell's being a bit modest because he's an exceptionally good skier, but he's also an exceptional athlete. So when the only thing is he doesn't do double black diamonds and he doesn't do moguls anymore, because that is when he could get hurt.
Yeah.
But I told someone the story not last year, but 2 years ago. He went to put his boot in the ski, and he tripped or something. And instead of falling, he did a somersault and stood up. And it was at the bottom of the hill, and everybody standing around went, did you just see what that guy did? And he was like, I went, Zel, do you know you just did that? But so we have to take into account that I think it all goes hand in hand, though.
Yeah. I mean,
and you do good.
I mean, this is going to sound a little bit like a crazy question, but I need to ask it because, when I talk to you, I'm like, you are more than just a normal 90-year-old. You're an exceptional 90-year-old. Like, forget the Alzheimer's and stuff. Do you feel like you have a neurodegenerative disease, Zel? Like, tell me what you think. Like, are you living life like I do have this Alzheimer's? Like, because I feel like you live your life like almost like it's not present.
I don't believe I have it. I'm physically active. I do as many things as I can. I have a son who is he's a vet, and the other son is in the movie industry, and our third son is living in Australia. But the kids speak to me, and we do things together, and make sure that I'm still working out regularly. I take a class on every Thursday morning from 10 to 11, a stretch class. I work out with weights. I do walking. I just keep doing things to keep active, and try. And I ended my business life, which was very strange because it came on suddenly because a neighbor of mine moved, and I had taken a year off of teaching because I had had an injury demonstrating how to be on the high bar to a group of students. And this fellow, a new young fellow moved in who was a scientist, and he was working at Connaught Laboratories. And he said, he's got this wonderful job, but it's not going to last long. And I said, why not? He says, the people who were there have been there for so long, and they have 5 divisions, and my division is going to be the insulin division. And they haven't been collecting the glands from the cattle and pigs that are slaughtered in a way that is good. He says, so I don't think it's going to last long. But Eli Lilly, who is the biggest in the world in this area, said, if you find the right person, we'll help him. We'll train him, and he'll help you. And I said, maybe I could be that right person. So Connaught and I made a deal. I'd spend a week down with Eli Lilly learning how to get the glands. I came back, they gave me 1 year to prove I could do it better than what they had. After a year of going all across Canada, organizing these collections and telling them how to do it properly, everything was way beyond what they expected. And I got a long-term contract and it lasted 33 years.
Wow. What was your position called? What did they call that position?
Animal byproduct collections.
We did
Wow.
special collections for pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
That's what it was, because we did more than just the glands for that. We even, I'll tell you one very funny story. One of the things that we got a call from was from Israel. They wanted to know that they heard that we were collecting, when they slaughter cows, fetuses in them are sent down to the basement and destroyed. But we had people who wanted us to bleed them before they were destroyed.
They're making people nauseous.
So this is what we did.
He always tells the story at a dinner party, which makes people very nauseous.
They said, well, what we want is, after you take the blood out, could you skin the animals and only take those skins from the animals that are kosher for Jewish use? They use the skin of the animals for the Torahs, okay? Anyway, so we talked for a few minutes and then everything was fine. And he said, okay, I said to him, okay, it looks like we have an agreement. He says, wait a minute, there's one thing we haven't finished up and it's most important. How will you guarantee that you'll only give me the skins from kosher animals? Well, I didn't know what to say. And I looked around the room and Gail was sitting there and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll leave my wife as security here. She got angry at me. They laughed and they all said, okay, we believe you.
My goodness. How did that feel, Gail, to be collateral?
I was actually going to kill him. Because in the way we divided it, it was a business that had never been done in Canada. It was only
So,
done
okay,
by-
I want to get to some questions because some people are sending some questions in. And we're
Okay.
out of time. So Barbara is asking Zel, do you feel that exercise helps you maintain a positive mood? What's the role of exercise?
Absolutely. Everything active, exercising, stretching, running, walking, everything is a big, big help to keeping your body in shape. And if your body's in shape, you feel comfortable, calm, good, able to get along and do the mental things easier.
And yes, I totally can relate to that, being a runner. Like without my kids and everyone knows when I don't run and I have a day and I don't run, it completely changes my mood. So I completely identify with that. Kelly is asking, she says, I'm curious, what is your purpose? What gets you up in the morning and has it changed since you've received a diagnosis?
Well, I have things that I have to get up for. For example, every once a week at Wednesday, I volunteer at the Toronto Zoo. I have to be there for 9:30 and I'm on the front gate welcoming people. I used to take tours, but my left foot got so bad for a while that I could not walk through Toronto Zoo. It's very hilly and tough. Since then, I've been able to find someone who corrected it, but now I'm permanently on the front gate welcoming people, and that's what I do. I volunteer at a hospital, Baycrest Hospital. I've done all sorts of things like that, and that keeps you busy.
You know, I have to ask you this, Zel. Like you must have been given some cognitive assessments, right, before you went on from the Toronto Memory Clinic. And how were your assessments? Because you seem very switched on. You're incredibly, social, as I can see. How did you do on your cognitive assessments?
He never told us.
They never told us anything. They just said, you carry on.
The only time Zel can't do something, it's from the very beginning, is when those tests, when they give you a bunch of words, and they tell you, talk about something else, and they say, what were the words? Zel's never been able to remember the words. But other than that, nothing.
So for me, this is interesting because, as we know, there are people who have plaque in their brains, but then they never really, as we learned from the 90+ study, right, that they did not die of Alzheimer's. It might have been something else, but not Alzheimer's disease. And, some people lived very long lives. So obviously there was a detection of amyloid in your brain, but do you consider yourself having a diagnosis, or do you think you just have symptoms that are Alzheimer's symptoms that are treatable? Like, I think I mean, that sounds a little bit strange to say, but what I'm trying to get at is now that the focus is on early stage, right? And that can even be like the person is not exhibiting signs of Alzheimer's yet has the pathology of Alzheimer's to treat. So when you talk about, do you say I have an Alzheimer's diagnosis, or do you think more like, okay, I possibly could have an Alzheimer's diagnosis someday?
I don't feel I have it because I've seen so many people who have real problems mentally, physically doing things that not remembering. Yes, I don't remember names and I don't remember some things, but when we first started this, Gail would say, "Do you want me to tell you?" And I said, "No, don't do it right away." But after a while, I'd say, "Yeah, hey, give me a hint or something to help me along." But I never felt badly, and working with the people at Toronto Memory Organization. Now they've been all from the doctors down to the people who inject you. They're all so nice and friendly. I look forward to going because it's just a friendly place to be, and I get treated so well, and it's wonderful.
Well, I have to say you're inspirational and amazing. And if, again, proving Claudia Calwes's group true, which is like, it sounds like you have a huge amount of social engagement in your life as well, right? Which keeps you mentally very healthy.
Well, that's something that is really strong now because I have three boyfriends who I have known either through public school or high school and right to today. They are all they can't do anything. They're all in terrible shape. And I feel so badly. So I visit with them and I try to cheer them up. But I'm nothing like that. And one of them was a surgeon, and he just sits in a chair and doesn't do anything, and probably has put on about 50 or 60 pounds.
Yeah.
Well, it's a sad thing to watch because as we've been getting older, we see it. And even though there's an age difference, you can see the people that keep busy and active and volunteer versus the people who stop working and then sit down.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, people shouldn't sit down.
And I think if you get to a place and they start to treat you properly and are kind as the Toronto Memory Organization has been, it gives you a lot of confidence and you feel good about yourself, not bad. And you because you're feeling good about yourself, you go out and do things more that keep you busy.
Yeah.
100%. Well, thank you both, Gail and Zel. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. You're certainly a testament of living well at 90. I love saying that. I mean, you're really good luck to you and all of the very best. And thank you. I think you're an inspiration to people, to
Thank you.
really
One last thing I might say to you. The only thing I could advise people about is if you sense something like I sensed with my brother, it could be anything. Don't sit and do nothing. Act on it before it gets to breaking you down. Right.
Yeah, that's a really important message. Well, thank you so much to both of you, our community. If you missed any of this interview, it's always, we will always have a version on YouTube or beingpatient.com. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletters. That's how you find out about interviews like these. And really, thanks to both of you. Keep skiing, Zel. You're amazing.
I hope so. I'm hoping for good snow this year.
So far, there's snow.
Well, let's hope so, but I have all confidence that you're going to be skiing for a long time. So thank you so much for joining us, and it was great to meet you both.
Thank you. Bye.